Hey there, STEM enthusiasts! Welcome back to Cameron's Lab Dive In, the go-to podcast for STEM students, crafted with passion by one of your own. I'm Cameron, your enthusiastic and ever-curious host. Buckle up for today's insightful episode. Ready to dive in?
Okay, so hi everyone. So today we're welcoming back the true full circle moment. I'm welcoming back my mentor, Dr. Carika Weldon. Super excited. Dr. Weldon is a Bermudian biomedical researcher with a focus on genetics. She's an absolute powerhouse. She changed the course of my life back in 2018 by helping me conduct my genetic research study. So that was about the TAS2R gene, and we were looking at how it would affect a person's sugar intake and their preference for sugar. So we're relating that to the diabetes in Bermuda. So Dr. Weldon's love of giving back to her island home saw her hosting workshops at schools, both public and private, and also with some of her PhD students. Not only that, if that's not enough, when COVID-19 hit the island, she came back and led the charge as the advisor to the government, for the science advisor, sorry. And then if that wasn't enough, she's now launched CariGenetics, she launched in October 2022, and she's now leading, the first Caribbean-wide genetic study, which is focused on breast cancer. So thank you, Dr. Weldon, for joining me. I'm super excited for our talk today.
Thank you. No, it's definitely a full circle moment because I remember you were the first person to ever interview me ever back when we started this. So this is lovely to be back.
I'm so excited. Yeah. Super duper excited. So what I wanted to talk about is really the podcast this year is focused on students. Well, forever will be focused on students. So I wanted to go back to how I met you personally. So for those that don't know, I met Dr. Weldon because of my mom. At the time, I wanted to be a virologist, and she saw Dr. Weldon's talk was coming up, and she was going to be discussing her genetic research at the Bermuda College. So she took me and my Aunt Joan, and we went and we listened. And as soon as it was over, my mom and my Aunt Joan, she's the president of the Senate, Joan Bliss Wright. She's like, get up there and talk to her. Make sure you introduce yourself and see if she'll be your mentor. And I'm so glad Dr. Weldon said yes, because look where we are today. So I was able to have my first genetic study thanks to Dr. Weldon, and also present at her inaugural Bermuda Principals Conferences, which is super exciting. So based on that, I wanted to talk about how you like to give back. So if we could talk a little bit about, like, what's your motivation for coming back? I know a lot of people don't. When they leave the island, they don't come back, but you're one of the wonderful few that does come back and give back to students. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a few things, but the first thing I'll say is I won two scholarships. So I won the undergraduate Sir Henry Tucker Scholarship and then the postgraduate Sir Arthur Dudley Sperling Scholarship. And I knew I would not be Dr. Weldon if it wasn't for these scholarships. And for me, the scholarships came from Bermuda. So I always had this kind of like, not debt, but I just was like, I want to give back because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my country and for what they did for me. And so that was the first thing. The second part of it is when I was doing my PhD and I was traveling to all these conferences, like I went to Europe, like Italy, on the coast of Italy, and joined the coast and at this conference, and I'm at conferences also in South Africa, and I'm at conferences in the US and in Poland and in Japan, right? So I'm traveling all over the world as this scientist, and the only one that didn't fit this category was the one in South Africa.
Yeah.
Every other one, it was 1% of the attendance was Black.
Wow.
And I was just like, what's going on?
Where's everybody?
Where's everybody? And, I was a lecturer at the time and I was going to some of these, and I was teaching a class that had 30% of my students who were Black. And so
Wow.
I was like, it's not like we're not interested in this topic. So between undergraduate and PhD, like, what happened? And
Yeah.
so that's also what really grabbed me. And I said, I need to some way bring science back to Bermuda because it's not a thing. It's not a, like, but it wasn't, and I was doing, it wasn't like a really popular topic to do. There isn't any science specific scholarships. There are some medical ones, but like you have to compete with everybody to get, to get scholarships. And so those two things, feeling like, I wanted to give back because I was invested in, but also I didn't see much other people like me in this field, like just in the world. I said, you know what, it has to be a way that I can give back and I can come and inspire the next generation. So that's why I do what I do.
I love that so much. And I think that even for myself now, I think when I was in high school and you were coming back to my classes and I was like, that's my mentor.
Yeah,
But even
exactly.
now, when I see you giving back, and I've experienced it myself with going to conferences, it's very hard to see people that look like me, number one, and also that come from where I am. So I don't see as many Bermudians in the conferences that I've been able to go to. So I think I really admire you for going back. So a lot of people be like, cool, I'm the only one, I made it, and then not come back.
Right.
So it's great that you actually do come back, which I absolutely love.
Thank you.
I also want to talk about how did you be this, I guess, love for giving back to Bermuda and wanting to bring Bermuda to the next level. Is that what led you to start CariGenetics? Is that one of the motivations that you had for getting started
So
with
So, okay, I was never planning to start a company. That I will tell you that from the
it?
beginning.
Okay.
My goal was at the end of 2020. I was already coming back, so regardless of what actually happened, like that was the plan. And I wanted to start a nonprofit research center.
Okay.
And my motivation was, okay, yes, I can start talking about science, and which I was to the young people, but then there's no jobs. So it's like, okay, they then have to go away. So I wanted to have a research center that was in Bermuda. I felt like research that I was doing away, I could bring back. I had learned how to, do all the different pieces I felt like I needed. And so that was my plan. Then the pandemic happened. So
Yeah.
shift the plan, came back earlier. But anyway, there's the silver lining is science became very apparent in terms of like a real need for everyone, which I knew I would have to do in my former plan. So it kind of worked out. And then also, I'm a household name now, which
Yeah.
has its benefits and not benefits because I have to be careful what I do every time. But it put me in a position where, okay, actually this I can do this work. When I resigned, I was like, let me pick this project back up, and I was like, I can do this work. But then it was like, okay, this needs to be sustainable, because now we're just going through a whole pandemic, and
Yeah.
those big donation budgets that people had is gone.
Yeah.
So what am I gonna do, right? And I already had some insight into like the third sector in Bermuda, which is the charitable sector, and they already exhausted all the options, and so it became, okay, well, how do I still do this but do it sustainably? And so initially I was told, okay, make it a business, and I was like, no, it's just a nonprofit. And then I came back 5 months later and said, yep, I'm going to do a business. So that's how we got here. And the name came about because, again, prior to COVID, I was only focused on Bermuda and bringing it back to Bermuda. Now, being the Bermudian scientist for the pandemic meant that I was now talking to other Caribbean scientists about what they had going on. And then that's when I realized, like, this is not a Bermuda issue, this is a Caribbean issue. We don't have the capacity to do genetic sequencing in the region. And that was really clear because the testing to tell which variant of the virus you had to be a sequencing test. You couldn't do PCR.
Okay.
Kept changing, and none of us were able to do it apart from in Trinidad and Tobago. We were sending our samples to the Carfa lab, or I think Bahamas got capacity at one point, but everyone else didn't have it. And so that was where I shifted from just focus on Bermuda to saying, "Hey, let's try to tackle the region. This bigger piece to bite off, but let's try to focus there because actually we all need this help and this capacity."
Wow, it's great. It's really cool how you've expanded from just looking at Bermuda and then now you've expanded to the whole Caribbean. It's just definitely that's definitely the next level.
I know.
Wow. Can you imagine
Sometimes I'm like, why did I do this to myself? But most days I'm like, yeah, it's so exciting because there's a real need, and we're starting to meet these researchers who see the need, and they're like so excited that we exist now. So it's all
Yeah.
very overwhelming sometimes.
I can't even imagine. I feel like when I was in high school, the first thing you would hear when you're like thinking about what you want to do next as a Bermudian, it'd be go into insurance, go into business. But you're really opening up, I guess, that opportunity for students to be able to think outside of the business and reinsurance field. No hate to the reinsurance and
Yeah,
business
we
field,
love it.
of course, but we love it. But I'm just saying, It's great to see that there's so many more science based opportunities for students now. You're a huge part of creating that, Bermuda. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a big thing that I want to do. Like, I really it's a big task, but I'm like, I need
Mhm.
to have like a biotech industry. That's what I'm trying to create, because we really can, and we just have this mentality that we can't. So
Mm.
we just send stuff away. That's what we've always done, but we shouldn't have to. We can do all of our testing here. So that's my mission.
Great. And
Yeah.
as a perfect segue, I recently saw your LinkedIn post and the article about the
Yes.
Prometheon that just got released. So I'm super excited that we have this now in Bermuda, because I
Me
remember when
too.
we were doing genetic research at first, it was like the mini PCR machines in the living room. So super excited that this is exciting now. So can you tell us a little bit more about that personal interest as well? I'm super
Yeah.
excited.
So okay, so when I was at Oxford before I came back, this is the same machine I was operating. So
Mm.
I was the project manager for all the Oxford nanopore projects, and I used to work really closely with the company. They are actually based in Oxford as well, the headquarters. And this is the dream I had when I wanted to bring this research to Bermuda. Now,
Mm.
we started the company. Obviously, you have to raise money.
Yeah.
That machine is not cheap. So we started with the small one, that was a little bit more accessible to get.
Mm.
And, had the plan, okay, we need to get this machine. So we finally was able to get it. It took 3 months to get here, actually. So we ordered
Wow.
it like 3 months ago.
Typical
Um,
Bermuda
and
shipping.
so now it's finally here. And I asked the company, like, is there another one of these in the Caribbean? And they
Mm.
said, no, this is the first one. So
Whoa.
we have a first one in the Caribbean, and I'm so
Woohoo.
excited because thank you, because we did the first study on the cacao,
Mhm.
making the reference genome, and in order to generate enough data for that reference genome, we had to use this machine.
Mm.
But when we did the project, because we didn't have it, we had
Mhm.
to send our staff to Boston to our collaborator that had it. And so now it's like we don't have to send anyone away. We can do it all here, which is just in time for the breast cancer study. And I'm just the whole kind of core value of the company is we should be able to do all of this locally. Like, it should be
Mm.
like local scientists doing this. So now that we have this, we can do it all locally. So for me, it's like a big, big moment. As you saw, I was like super excited about it. And we're looking to, yeah, not just be the only,
Yeah,
because yes, we're the first, but we want to inspire others and,
of
be
course.
able to help them to get it as well, so that we can just have more research capacity in the Caribbean.
I love that. Absolutely great. I wanted to go back to the breast cancer study. So I'm not sure how many people know, but it is currently Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so perfect timing. But I wanted to talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about your motivation for choosing the breast cancer study, if you wouldn't mind. Like, how did you decide on that one? Because I feel like there's so many different problems that you could have picked. Why
Yes.
pick that one first?
That's a really good, yeah, and I agree. There's so many different diseases that we could have started
Mhm.
with. For me, it was always gonna have to be cancer,
Yeah.
because I was a cancer researcher when I did my PhD. So that's my disease I focused on, and then also I have a personal connection to that because it runs in my family, right? Bermuda, it probably runs in most of our families. It's a fable, or like a saying, like we have a lot of cancer going around. So for me, it was very important to me that we start there, and also my the reason I got into this nanopore sequencing, which is this really cool technology, and how to say this, how I got into this was, unfortunately, my grandmother passed away from cancer when I first started the first conference in
Oh, wow.
2017, and from that she left all of her grandchildren money, and I used that money to buy my first sequencer, the nanopore sequencer, and that's say for me it's like this is almost like a homage to my grandmother,
Mhm.
who I wasn't able to help. And I remember my cousin was like, "Aren't you a cancer researcher? Why can't you save her?" I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't know what to do. So for me, this again is like really personal that we start with cancer. Um, Breast cancer in particular, we're starting with because it is actually one of the highest disease in terms of cancer, one of the ones that has the highest rate of people that survive. So if we want to study like what caused it in terms of like genetic inheritance, we have a bigger pool of people to actually tap into.
Mhm.
So that was really the decision that went into which cancer we picked. I'm really excited to say that we have another study we're going to be launching, which
Yay.
is prostate cancer, because I
Mhm.
am very keen on making sure we are inclusive. And yes, we started with breast cancer, which is mainly women, and so we
Yeah.
need to focus on one that is for men. And so we're working with some local researchers. So I won't spill that too early, but we are having, that is our definitely our next study that we're working on currently to get ethics and everything for. So yeah, so I'm just really excited. Like the for me, and the other thing as well is that as we started to look into it, we started to see that in the world scale or a global view, the Caribbean is actually like leading in breast cancer and prostate cancer deaths. Like
Wow.
the top country that is dying from breast cancer is Barbados.
Oh, wow.
It's a Caribbean country out of the entire world. So yes, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and what we're trying to do is actually bring awareness to Caribbean breast cancer awareness because no one really talks about that as much, but it's actually a real issue, and we need to figure out what is going on.
Yeah, that's really true. Wow. I wouldn't have even guessed that.
Yeah.
New knowledge on the day. I wanted to go back to looking at the study, like as in terms of like men and women. When we were first doing it, I know like getting the men involved was such a struggle. So how do we feel about I guess Bermudians and the people of the Caribbean in general? How are they feeling towards genetic studies now? I know back in the day it was a bit of a struggle to get people involved. Like say we're doing genetic study, people are like, ugh.
Right,
Right. So
exactly.
how are you dealing with that now? Is it a little bit better? Has anything improved? Any challenges you might have?
I think it's probably a little bit worse actually now after the
Oh
COVID.
no.
Yeah, the trust of what medical and research is doing is not always there. But one of the ways we're trying to tackle that is education and being very transparent. But also we are making sure, because this is something I learned from doing what I did with the vaccine and the pandemic and being the spokesperson, like basically for the government on what the vaccine was, is you have to give people information and let them decide. You can't force anyone. You have to, you just present all the information and people will come to a conclusion. So I don't think it's definitely not better. The pandemic took us like 10 steps back, but what we learned is, just give the information and people will come. We actually are really excited that, I didn't know how the reception was going to be to this breast cancer study. We were looking for 100 people, and as of, I think yesterday, we have 136 people that have signed up.
Oh, congrats.
So a lot more than I was anticipating, although some of them are not eligible because of different criteria, but just the interest
Yeah, that's
is a
huge.
lot, right? So I think what we've been able to do is really showcase that this is a need, and in order to fix this problem where we can have more tailored drugs for us and more tailored treatments, we have to get involved. So yeah, so not better, I think a bit worse, but we're working over it, we're working through it, and a big part of that is working with really trusted people that people like know. So people know me, so me being a part of the study and explaining it helps, but in these other Caribbean countries they don't know me. So we're
Yeah,
going to be working with researchers in those countries who have built that trust and be able to explain exactly what's going on so that people have all the information they can make a good decision.
it's really exciting. And it's great to think about this idea of like making sure that you have the people's trust, because I feel like that's something that people would, when you think of medicine, that's something you would expect to be lacking, especially for people when they think of medicine, they're like, oh, no, don't trust them, don't go to them. But it's
Right.
great that you're trying to build that solid foundation for people when they do come to you, which is really, really great.
Exactly.
I wanted to go back to a little bit about your own background. So I know when I first met you, one of the challenges that we had was that people were really shocked by your age, by how much you've achieved because you're so young. And I think that it's only getting worse now. Your own company around the Caribbean, first in the Caribbean to have this wonderful Prometheon, so we don't have to go anywhere. It's just you're just making it worse. It's great though. It's lovely for those of us that are like, I'm too young to do this, or feeling like I'm too young to start. But you're a great example of someone that just completely ignored that barrier and is just leaping over it. So if you wouldn't mind talking about what's it like being a young person in the field, and especially like gaining the respect, I suppose, of your peers, especially Bermudians. No offense to everyone, but it's a very difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah, no, for sure. We are definitely very particular in
Mm.
Bermuda. Um, it wasn't how can I say it? It was interesting. It was weird because a lot of it came from the pandemic. So when I came I was in my 20 I was 29. When I landed, stood in my 20s and doing all these things, and from a public perception, I was getting a lot of support,
Mm.
but unfortunately on the back end with people I was working, I wasn't. So it was very weird because I was like, what is going on? Like, why am I getting any issues? But again, the age can rub some people the wrong way if they feel like they put in all these years and they haven't made it where they thought. Um, I think what I can say is what helped me is in science, and I don't know if it goes across other disciplines as well. But when you're a scientist, like people respect you, like no matter what age you are. So like my supervisor, he would just let us call him by his first name. It wasn't like, oh, I'm Professor so and so. It was just like, call me Ian. Like that's fine. And if you discover something, no matter what age you were, not even no matter what like qualifications you had, you get that respect.
Mm.
Like if you discovered something, it was your result and you got the props for it. And that's kind of the culture I'm coming from in terms of like, just give respect across the board. So I never felt like, oh, well, I'm young, so I need to be quiet and I can't say anything. I never had that. Like I was very much outspoken and felt respected where I came from as a scientist. So that's what I brought with me to Bermuda. I think that age really shouldn't stop you from doing anything. I think actually it's
Mm.
a bonus because you haven't been tainted with all the hurdles or the, oh, we can't do this, oh, this is not how it's done. You don't have that, and so you're just like totally open, totally in a better position to be innovative because you're completely like a blank slate almost. um
Mm.
so I see it as a bonus. And yeah, I like breaking records. So I like to say, like, I was the youngest lecturer that joined when I was at De Montfort. And right now, as far as I'm aware, we are, I think in terms of how much money we've raised as a local Bermuda company starting out with owned by a Bermudian, I think we
Mm.
might be one of the top companies for that to raise $2 million in like 5 months. And
Oh, wow.
so yeah,
Very
I still
exciting.
can't believe we've done that either. Like, yeah, let's break some records and set a standard. But I just want everyone to know, like, no matter what age you are, like it that should not hinder anything. If you look back
Mm.
as well at like Apple and Facebook and all these big companies, they were started by young people.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
it's like, don't limit yourself because you think you're a certain age. Actually, that is a benefit. And yes, you may not know all answers to everything, but no one does. So yeah.
That's really good advice. I was going to ask you as well what advice you would have for students, but you already went there, so yay.
Yeah.
um, I wanted to go back to CariGenetics and just kind of talk about what future plans you have for it. So where do you see it going? How do you see it progressing? So I know you mentioned that it started in Bermuda, but now it's had to expand based on your collaboration with other scientists in the Caribbean. But do you see it going further than that? Or where do you see it to go in the future?
Yeah, so my ideal is, yes, we have CariGenetics, which is short for Caribbean Genetics, not my name, because a lot of people think it's for Carika Genetics. No, didn't name the company after myself. But my idea, or what I envision, is that we have got the Caribbean region, we expand into Central and South America, always bearing in mind that to be Caribbean, you're a mix of everything, right? Which extends around
True.
the whole globe. So yes, we start in the Caribbean, but then we start to expand out into all the other regions. We go to Africa, we can go to India, and we actually just make this huge database that now we can use to make drugs that are specific for all of us. So that's my kind of like real big goal, is that we are not only expanding into these other regions, but we are creating local capacity and we are making jobs for local scientists who can then sustainably run and do these studies locally. That's a big thing because a lot of centralization happens in the
Mhm.
industry, but we need a decentralized thing. So that's the vision that I have.
Lovely. Wonderful. Thank you. And then just, I guess, going from that, if you wouldn't mind giving advice to students who might be either they're starting off in high school, like where I started, to looking at genetics, or maybe they're in university thinking, oh, well, I already picked my topic over here, so I might have to stay there. But I know for other people, they might have switched over. I know for yourself, you even switched over to
Yeah.
something else. So, what advice would you have for students that are thinking, how do I get started in something like this? Like, how do I get to that level of, I guess, yeah, that level in the research field? How do they get there? What would you recommend?
So the main thing I'm going to say is that there are many different roles in a genetics study.
Mm,
Yes, you have people like us who are, lab scientists who actually generate the data, but there
mhm,
is a whole other side of the data analysis that requires data scientists, that requires electrical engineers, that
mhm,
requires, people that know how to code. So it's not just someone that knows how to go in a lab in a white coat and pipette up liquids up and down. That's one part of it. There's also the project management side. So I don't just employ scientists. I have project managers. I have people that recruit people into the studies who are nurses. So I think don't limit your thoughts that okay, if I want to be a geneticist, I have to be someone that is doing the genetic research, like the genetic sequencing. That's one piece of the pie. Um, there are so many roles. You have the informatics people, you have clinical side, you have clinical doctors. So even if you're doing medicine, you can also get into genetic research. um, don't feel like you have to switch, because actually probably what you're doing is going to be very useful for what we're doing. There's so many different sides to this coin, as I would put it. But if you do feel like you're like way off, I mean, if even if you're a lawyer, there's like specific lawyers and legal side of this that we don't have in Bermuda. We don't have that expertise. So you could be someone in the healthcare industry that's a lawyer. So again, there's so much that we can do around this. That's not just the science part.
mm,
So that'll be my first thing. So I don't want to discourage anyone, because whatever you're passionate in doing, follow that. But there's a lot of applications. But if you do want to switch, switch. I mean, no one's gonna care that oh, you did this degree and then you switched over. Actually, we had a meeting with the researcher we're going to be working with on the prostate cancer. He's a urologist now. He's a urology surgeon. So meaning he does like surgery on prostate. And his first degree was in computer science.
mm.
He made a switch. He's now a medical doctor that does surgery and doesn't use that at all. So
Good.
don't feel like what you do now limits you. It There's transferable skills. Going through the process is making you a better person, and you can completely do a certain topic for your undergraduate and then do a master's in something else, and that is still going to be very useful. I also know people that done undergraduates. I met someone actually. They done an undergraduate in biochemistry like me, and
Mm.
they're in insurance, like they're top insurance execs. Like
Interesting.
again, there is definitely able to pivot. It actually makes you a more well-rounded person. So yeah, don't feel like what you choose is like a death sentence or like a prison where you have to do that particular thing. There's so many ways that you can go with it, and just follow your passion.
Love that. I'm going to take that, figure out what piece of the pie you want to be advice to the next level. I hope I keep embodying that as I keep going.
Yeah.
So thank you again, Dr. Weldon, for today. So excited again to have you for this wonderful full circle moment. Just to say,
Thank
guys, the
you.
full circle back again. Woo!
Well, I'm going to say this on camera. I am looking forward to bringing Cameron into CariGenetics at some point. I don't know if it's in an intern or whatever the case may be, but there's definitely a place for you.
Yay! You're here to hear first, everyone. We're excited. But thank you again, and I'll just see you next time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.
Hi again, awesome listener. That wraps up another deep dive of Cameron's Lab Dive In. Before you dive back into your day, see what I did there? Take a second to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Want a behind the scenes look? Bonus content? Or just some good old STEM fun? Follow me on my socials, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Cameron's Lab. And remember, every episode is a new adventure, and we've got some thrilling dives lined up for you. Don't miss out. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.